So, okay, if you want to tell me who you are and who you work for.
I'm John Hilary. I'm the Executive Director at War on Want.
Okay, can you tell me what War on Want is and what you do, what you stand for?
Well, War on Want's an anti-poverty charity which has been going for over 50 years. On the one hand, supporting partners in developing countries who are coming together and really mobilising for change in their own societies, and on the other hand campaigning for change in the UK so that we can change the policies which our government has towards developing countries and really get rid of the systems which keep poor countries and poor people in poverty.
And so you've been going for 50 years, can you tell me a little bit about how it started?
Yeah,
and
sure.
Where you came from?
It was actually in 1951, Harold Wilson, the former Labour Prime Minister, before he became Prime Minister, and another of the great sort of figures of the Labour left, Victor Gallant, they got together because they saw that after the Second World War you had this beginning of the arms race where you had more and more money being put into weapons and armaments, and they said, look, early on, let's actually use this type of money towards more profitable, more useful ends. And they advocated the idea of having 3% of national wealth devoted towards international development. Unfortunately, it was an idea a bit ahead of its time, but the principle of challenging militarization, challenging the expenditure on war, and trying to funnel that into more useful purposes, that remains at the heart of War on Want's work.
Yeah. And what sort of campaigns have you got going on at the moment?
We've got a range of campaigns. As I say, part of what we're doing is still looking at war and the consequences of war, particularly on more vulnerable populations. So we've been very much at the forefront of the anti-war movement in Iraq, campaigning also for justice and peace in Palestine. But more broadly than that, we have campaigns often focused around labour rights, workers' rights, because War on Want comes out of that type of background. And one of the ones which has been most successful recently is trying to link up where high street shops in the UK, whether it be Primark or Tesco or Asda, aren't actually paying the workers who produce their clothes a proper wage, a living wage. So we've been able to highlight quite a lot in the media how the cheap prices we enjoy on the high street are actually possible because there's mass exploitation at the sharp end, and often women workers who are being paid as little as 5 pence an hour, working 80-hour weeks and still not being able to feed their family because they're not being paid a living wage.
Yeah, there was the riots on Oxford Street, and there have been riots, of course, in factories producing.
Absolutely, it's a sort of ironic parallel, sort of mirror image of each other.
Yeah. How do you get past the almost sort of denial of that? I mean, Primark is hugely popular, as an example, not to pick on them. How do you get it through into people's hearts that they're actually going to start thinking about it and not buying from there?
Well, you know, one of the things which is really heartening for us is that when we've done surveys of shoppers, even in bargain shops like Asda and places like that, overwhelmingly, huge majorities, 80% and more, say that yes, they love a bargain, but they don't want to have that bargain if it's coming at the expense of people in poorer countries. So actually, fundamentally, at the heart of most people's choices is a recognition that they can't be enjoying these sort of fantastic 2 for the price of 1 deals if it's actually going to mean somebody else suffering. So that's part of it. But the other side, we don't actually really call on people to stop shopping at these places. We call on them to engage both with the companies, to make sure that the companies realise that there is interest and there's a call for them to behave ethically, but also we call on them to ask the government to put in place proper rules and regulations so that it's not just about consumers having to make choices as to where they shop, but consumers being confident that wherever they shop they're going to have goods which are ethically produced.
Yes, I have tried to boycott myself, but then found I couldn't buy clothes in and I know another thing that you're working on is the whole issue of mercenaries.
Yes.
And that's something that we actually hear very little about. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Sure,
absolutely. Well, it's been a particular feature of the last 5 or 6 years, particularly with the rise of the war in Afghanistan and Iraq. Previously, mercenaries were always seen as the dogs of war, soldiers of fortune, slightly desperado types who get involved in coup attempts in Africa, like Simon Mann, who's just been sent down for a rather long stretch in Equatorial Guinea, and that was the sort of the image of a slightly fringe bit of the mercenary world. What's now happened is that whole companies have been formed, bringing in these mercenary soldiers and actually contracting them out to governments and to other companies to provide this militarized security. And it's become a massive business. In Iraq, for example, one of the biggest, most successful British firms, Aegis, has got 2 contracts which between them total about $800 million. And that's just to sort of provide this militarized security for the US government. So it's a massive industry. Estimates actually that the whole industry is worth about $100 billion a year across the world. So a really big going concern. But the problem is that you have more and more of these companies operating in war zones, and they're completely outside the law. If you think of the British military or the US military, they have chains of command, they have battle orders, they have all of these checks and balances to make sure that things just don't go completely AWOL. And with the private companies, we've seen more and more where mercenary operators will start opening fire on civilians. A couple of the examples from Iraq are where the Blackwater operators, they opened fire on a traffic jam and killed 17 people just stuck in their cars. British companies have had exactly the same scandals at their doors. So in each case there's no way of getting back to them, there's no channels of accountability or anything like that, and that is a real problem for us. We feel that there should definitely be accountability, there should be rules, legislation to bring them under control again.
And who would hold them accountable in that case? Would they be part of the military then, or? Well,
we think it should be very much the home government, so it would be through that sort of the democratic accountability, a bit like the arms trade at the moment. If you want to get a license for exporting arms to whatever country, Saudi Arabia or Indonesia or Israel, you have to go through the process of having that license checked off by the government, and then also it goes to oversight in Parliament, which is an important side of it. We're just suggesting there should be a parallel thing for these private military companies. So they also have to go through the process of registering with the government, of having to go through the licensing agenda, and actually there's quite a lot of support within government for that. It's just they haven't managed to make it to putting legislation in place. So that's why we're really pushing them to go the extra mile on that one.
And how can people get involved in War on Want?
Well, part of War on Want is very much about getting people involved. We really encourage as many people as possible to come behind the campaigns. We try to mobilise as many people as possible to take exciting actions, whether it be going and contacting MPs or actually coming out on demonstrations, more direct action. There's a whole range of things which people get involved in. And obviously we really support people to join War on Want, to become members. It's really through the strength of our long-standing membership that we've been able to have the success we have in the past few years. So it's very much a people's organisation. It's a lovely organisation to work for. You really feel it's a focused organisation which sort of tells it as it is, and then goes and tries to make change where it's needed. So I thoroughly recommend it.
Good. And what's the website that people can?
www.waronwant.org.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thanks very much.